We need to talk about the genius that is the cult of the Roman emperors. Now, in ancient times in the Eastern Mediterranean, it was perfectly normal to worship your ruler or king as a living god. Think about the Egyptian pharaohs, for example. And when Roman emperors came into contact with these eastern provinces, they were worshipped as living gods. But in the west of the empire, particularly in Italy, this was seen as a massive taboo. Not only was it a bit weird, but it would have been very provocative and would have been seen as an overstep of imperial power. So to get around this issue, the first Roman emperors decided to let people worship their genius. Now, the word genius doesn't mean the same thing as it does today as it did in ancient Rome. It is the embodiment of their spiritual power. So people would worship the genius of the Roman emperor. And they were very clever because they closely associated their genius with Roma, which was the personification of Rome itself. This was such a clever tactic because it was a loyalty test for the subjects. You were allowed to worship whichever gods or god you wanted, but you had to worship the genius of the Roman emperor if he ever came knocking. Certain Roman emperors were deified after their death. This means they were made into a literal god. One such emperor was Vespasian. He was a general who worked his way up through the ranks and eventually won a civil war, becoming emperor. When the Emperor Vespasian was dying of dysentery in 79 AD, he said, "Oh dear, I think I am becoming a god." There isn't really a rhyme or reason why certain emperors were deified whereas others weren't. A lot of it has to do with politics. For example, if you're the son of an emperor, it makes sense to want to deify your father because you are literally the son of a god, and that carries a lot of weight in ancient Rome. One of these instances was with the Emperor Claudius. He was seen as quite a weak and bookish emperor, but he did authorise the conquest of Britain in order to buff up his military credentials. It was actually a resounding success. The south of Britain was conquered under his reign, and he rode through the streets of Colchester on an elephant. Colchester, or Camalodunum as the Romans would have called it, was the capital of Roman Britannia for a while. And in order to really stamp his authority on his place, he ordered a temple be constructed to himself and Roma. And after he died, he was deified, so the temple became the temple of the Divine Claudius. When the Romans conquered a place, they did force the locals to help them build stuff, pretty much slave labour. So think about it like this: you've just been conquered by the Romans, they come in, force you to build a temple to the guy who just conquered you. Yeah, that's not going to go down well, is it? What it does do is it separates the loyal citizens of the emperor from the filthy barbarians who don't want to worship the emperor. And that's exactly what it did. Because a few years later, in 60 or 61 AD, these tensions bubbled over into outright rebellion. Led by the Iceni queen Boudica on her war chariot, the Britons burnt down the temple and Colchester to the ground. There were some veteran legionaries hiding in the temple who made their last stand. These were true loyal citizens of the deified Claudius. So the cult of the Roman emperor was a genius method to control his subjects. In the East, he was worshipped as a god. Occasionally after his death, he was worshipped as a god in the West too, but most of the time, people worshipped his genius, which in the end proved to be a great loyalty test and a really clever method of control.